We're going to wrap up some stuff in the Western Front. We're going to talk about the Eastern Front with Russia. It's going to mention a little bit what we talked about Monday with the United States entering the war. And then we're going to finish the war, and we're going to look at some peace treaties today. So again, I'm sorry this is going to be a little long, but you're not going to have to hear me until Monday, and then next Monday, and next Wednesday. You're not going to hear me do notes at all, so we can just grind it out. We'll make it. So we've been talking about trench warfare, and that's been specifically on the Western Front. We haven't talked about any battles in the Western Front yet, but if you want to go ahead and write this battle, the first battle of the Marne. Again, all the major battles you're going to need to know about is going to be in the reading. Your reading needs to be done by Monday. This first reading. And so this first battle of the Marne is important because it kind of stopped Germans' plan. What was the Germans' plan called? The Schlieffen Plan. And remember, someone describe it really quick. What was their plan? Yeah, to go through Belgium, to get to France as soon as possible, make France surrender quickly, and then they're going to focus on Russia. Well, this first battle of the Marne is going to cause the Schlieffen Plan to fail. So now Germany is having to fight the two-front war. And we're going to see basically the exact same thing is going to happen in World War II, except it's going to be a little different. But Germany's still going to fight a two-front war in World War II. Essentially, the Western Front, and we talked about this last week, they just dug into the trenches because of all this new weaponry. Playing defense was going to be easier than like moving forward and pushing forward. And we're going to look why in a second. The Battle Overdone. In this battle, both sides, both the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance, both are going to lose a bunch of men. Here's one of those pictures that we had looked at before. There's hundreds of these pictures where it's the before and after. Battle of the Somme. This is on a river. You're going to have over 1 million casualties in this battle alone. And again, when we say battle, a lot of it is just kind of like the trench warfare. They're going to try to push and take the other people's trenches. But once they get into no man's land, you're going to have thousands and thousands of men die. You also have to think of like the battlefield. If you're running through no man's land and you get shot, it's very rare that someone's going to probably go out to no man's land to get you because they're going to be afraid of getting killed. So again, this trench warfare is not the most ideal. So let's look at the results of these. In the Battle of Verdun, the Germans gained 4 miles. In the Battle at the Somme, the British advanced 5 miles. So is anything really being accomplished here in reality?
Yeah,
No.
1 mile.
No, yeah, a few miles. which if you look at a huge country like France and Belgium and Germany, that's not that far. 4 miles is like from here to Johnson High School. Like, that's how far they got. Really not that far. So the Western Front is going to be in this stalemate until the Americans arrive, and we'll look at that in a second. So on the Eastern Front, so we talked about the Western Front, we looked at trench warfare. You're going to have Russia and Serbia, so remember the alliances at the beginning. Russia and Serbia and Germany and Austria-Hungary. So remember, in the pre-World War I map, Germany and Russia share a border, which no longer exists now. And so a lot of this fighting is going to be on that German-Russian border, and then also between Serbia and Austria-Hungary. So Russia, remember they had that alliance with France, the Franco-Russian alliance. France has been dumping money to help Russia with their infrastructure. Russia is going to mobilize quicker than Germany expected, and Russia is going to begin attacking Germany and Austria-Hungary in 1914. Germany's going to end up kind of holding its line. Remember, most of the German army is where in 1914?
Western.
Yeah, in the Western, because of the Schlieffen Plan. They sent most of their army with the Schlieffen Plan trying to knock out France quickly. In this battle, you're going to have the Russians. I feel like they kind of don't care about their people sometimes in World War I and World War II, because you look at the amount of casualties they had. By December, the Russians are going to still be driven back and held by the Germans and by Austria-Hungary, and you're actually going to see the Russians begin to retreat. So here we go, write this down. By 1916, so the war has now been going on for 2 years. In Russia, like we said, they had a lack of infrastructure. They had a lack of like that mobilization, industrialization. That's what France was helping them with. And so France can't help them anymore because France is kind of stuck fighting their own war. And so the Russian army is going to be short on weapons, at least modern weapons, short on supplies, short on transportation. And so remember, they're really good at having a lot of people, but if you don't have the things to provide those people with weapons or supplies, you're basically screwed. And so how do you think the morale was in Russia, whether in the military or as a civilian? How do you think the morale was by 1916?
Pretty bad.
Yeah, pretty low morale, pretty poor morale. The Russian people are going to grow tired of fighting this war. Because if you're already in a poor country and the government is trying to, again, just take all the supplies, it's a total war. The people are going to grow tired of rationing and helping with the war effort, especially if they're losing. To make things even worse for the Russians, their morale is low. They're also going to be cut off from the Allies. So again, all our allies are in green right here. You got Great Britain, France, Italy, The north, you can't do anything up there. Siberia. German Navy, again with the U-boats, are going to patrol the Baltic Sea. And in the south, the Ottoman Empire and Turkey are controlling the Black Sea. However, like we always talked about, the Russians, the one good thing they're always good at is having a lot of people. This is a graph showing how many more people Russia has than everyone else. Also, you can see the amount killed. They have more than anyone else. France is second with over 1 million. But, write this down, put a star next to this. By occupying the Central Powers, so by occupying Germany and Austria-Hungary in the east, the Russians are kind of they're going to help the Allies by just taking up space. The Russians are going to last in the war for about 3 years until 1917, and we're going to see why in a second. But this is going to save the Allied powers. This one is important. The Gallipoli campaign. Gallipoli is in Turkey. It's right here. And so the goal of this campaign was to first take Gallipoli, move in, take Constantinople, aka Istanbul, and then be able to supply Russia through the Black Sea. The idea was to kind of cut Turkey and cut the Ottoman Empire off from Europe.
Is it already Turkey?
No, it's still the Ottoman Empire, but when they're saying defeat the Turks, they're talking about the ethnic group, the Turks. And then, we're not going to talk about it, but the Turks are going to end up at Turkey is after the Ottomans collapse, the Turks are going to take over the Ottoman Empire, and that's why it's called Turkey. But then all the Middle East is going to get split up by the European countries. That's the goal. However, this plan fails. You see this land invasion is not super ideal for the people invading from the water because there's a mountain there. The Allies are going to end up retreating after losing 250,000 troops. But write this down, put a star next to this. All while this is going on, you're going to have German colonial possessions all around the world being attacked and seized. So in that video we watched a few weeks ago that was looking at like the fighting and the causes, it does talk about this. You see German, all their area is in like red, or at least the Central Powers are in like orangish color. And so they're going to have colonies in Africa, colonies in Southeast Asia, attacked and seized worldwide. Now it's hard to see this. This is a political cartoon. This British guy is holding a sword. And on that little island here, it says business as usual. Because Great Britain has always been notorious at this point in world history for colonizing and seizing different possessions. So they're looking at this as business as usual, taking over these possessions. So you're going to have colonial people all around the world, even from Africa, Southeast Asia, South America even, that are fighting, technically fighting in World War I. I think this picture is just one of those.
Miss Falls?
Yes.
I need Benjamin Penley in the office for just a moment.
Yes, ma'am. I think this picture is kind of one of those pictures where you look at in history and it's like, this is probably one of the weirdest things that has ever happened. You're going to have
Guys petting a kangaroo.
yeah, guys petting a kangaroo in Egypt in the middle of World War I with a mobilized European-looking army. I like that picture. It's unique. And even though these colonial troops and this colonial seizure of lands and colonies was a very minor part of the war, it is what makes it the First World War.
So why are the other countries that are mobilizing using muskets still? Do they not supply them with like the real
Yeah,
stuff?
they're not. Yeah, they're sending all the modern weapons to fight in Europe. So we talked about this yesterday. What are the causes for the United States getting into the war? Name them out. Good, taking of the Lusitania. So 1917, Germany is going to do the unrestricted submarine warfare. They're going to sink the Lusitania. What was the second one you said, Sammy? Good, the Zimmerman note or the Zimmerman telegram. That cool cartoon is showing Mexico or Germany trying to get Mexico to join a war effort to distract the United States. And then a third reason we didn't really talk about this, but it's kind of self-explanatory, is that America and England, we're going to share our common ancestry, share our common language, share kind of economic ties. And so the U.S. is going to join the war. When the United States joins the war, our soldiers are going to be nicknamed doughboys. Does anyone speculate why we're called doughboys?
Inexperienced. They're soft, yes.
Not really experienced. What'd you say?
Fat.
Yeah, we're kind of fat. We're going to, like, staturally be bigger than a lot of the European armies. We talked about this last time too. World War I is a total war. We talked about rationing. We talked about propaganda. We talked about how governments are turning to women and African Americans, especially in the United States, to do these factory jobs. In Europe, fast forward a little bit. Once the Americans get there, once the Americans reinforce France and Belgium and Great Britain on the Western Front, the Allies are going to quickly just kind of march through Germany and end the war. However, write this down. Before the United States gets into the war, so I guess this would have been, they sank the Lusitania in January. We declared war, and then we have to mobilize, so it's going to take us some time to mobilize and get over there. The Russians, remember going back to Russia, at this point their morale is what? Low. The Russian people are going to force Tsar Nicholas II, who at this time is the leader of the Russians. They're going to force him to step down. You're going to have Russian troops refusing to fight. Is this a problem? You're fighting a war and your troops refuse to fight.
Yes.
That's a big problem. Tsar Nicholas isn't going to last that much longer. There's a really dramatic picture of him being executed. There's a photograph of the room that he was executed in. And so basically the Russian people are going to get fed up with the Tsar, like taking things from them, the Tsar controlling things, but again, the Tsar is doing it for the war effort. Put a star next to this. Vladimir Lenin, he's going to be the leader of the Communist Party in Russia. And this is where we see Russia become the Soviet Union. We will probably look at this a little closer after the IA workdays. Because the Russian Civil War, it's a civil war, it's really quick. This changing of power in Russia is going to be impactful for World War II and for the Cold War. We'll start into this thing down here. Lenin, so once Lenin becomes in power, he decides to go ahead and sign a peace treaty with the Central Powers. So at this point, Russia is pulling out of the war. They're like, all right, we're communists now. We're going to do our own thing. We don't have the money or the time or the infrastructure to keep fighting. We don't have the willpower to keep fighting at this point. So we're just going to go ahead and make a peace treaty. However, we're going to see after Lenin, Stalin's going to come into power. And Stalin is basically going to ramp up the Soviets' industrialization and factories, and they're going to start building up as a world power, especially after World War II. So this is, what was the date on that? March 1918. So March 1918, the war in the Eastern Front is over. Russia didn't really surrender. They negotiated a peace treaty. And so Germany is setting up for this huge spring offensive. the Americans are going to be the changing force in World War I, because with fresh American troops, with tanks, the Allies are going to push Germany back at the Second Battle of the Marne. And soon the Allies are going to be steadily advancing into Germany. Once Germany's allies see that that Germany is kind of falling off the rails, Bulgaria is going to surrender. The Ottoman Turks are going to surrender. This says it was this piece of primary source is a leaflet drops to German troops, and it says the French military commander of the Allied military forces in Macedonia met with the Bulgarian representative, blah, 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 blah. The 30th of September, an armistice was reached in the conditions set by the Entente. The war between Bulgaria and the Entente power is over. So again, this is another example of using those leaflets as propaganda. So they're basically telling the German officers or the German soldiers, like, hey, the people are already surrendering, like, go ahead and quit. You're now going to see a revolution sweeping through Austria-Hungary. So again, Austria-Hungary, we talked about, they're made up of all those different ethnic groups. At the end of this, you're going to see a bunch of different countries. You're not going to see Austria and Hungary will still be countries, but you'll see Czechoslovakia and other countries pop up. So here we go, the end of the fighting. If you don't write anything down, at least write this last one down. Essentially, World War I just exhausted the Germans. You're going to have just people refusing to fight. November 1918, they're refusing to sail. There's going to be a rebellion in Berlin. Kaiser is going to get kicked out of power. Kaiser Wilhelm. There's not really a decisive battle like we're going to have in World War II at the Battle of Berlin. But they call it Armistice Day, November 11th, 1919. Germany is going to stop fighting. So they say at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, that was when peace happened. 11/11 at 11. So again, Wilhelm is going to step down after a mutiny. And again, armistice is signed 11/11. Oh, it was 18, not 19. My bad. 19 is when all the treaties happen. What's the difference between an armistice and a surrender?
This is like both sides agree to stop.
Yeah, stop doing what?
fighting.
Yeah, good, so